Okay, it does feel nice to be in the centre of a powerhouse at the heart of a top tech city, and it's time to introduce to our first keynote speaker now, and someone who's a true visionary when it comes to responsible communications and sustainable marketing. Steve Connors, the co-founder and CEO of Creative Concern, is a man of many talents, including creating strange installations out of trees, lights, and beautiful type. Well, Creative Concern are on the brink of producing a groundbreaking international guide and have also been at the forefront of a transformative project called BeeCom. It's time to go on a whirlwind journey into the realms of ethical, sustainable, and more responsible advertising and marketing as Steve brings us the good, the bad, and the misguided. Please make him welcome.
Right, should be on. Are we on? Brilliant. Right, good morning, everybody. So lovely to see you. You are all extraordinarily beautiful. From up here, I should have brought my phone. I could have taken a photo. So thank you, James, for that introduction. I'm going to go really quick because I've got a gazillion things to say and not much time to say it. But I am overjoyed to be following Sherelle, who's awesome and who we're working with on that Zero Carbon Challenge. So I'm first of all going to introduce Creative Concern and then explain what we're doing on ethics, advertising, and responsible communications. I'll start with the crisis I had when I was here at the University of Manchester with a whole bunch of ethical issues running through my head, but I realized the only thing I was good at was putting words and pictures together. And I wanted to work in advertising, but as a vegan socialist, it didn't feel like the natural destination for me. So I got into reading a bit more about what you could do with advertising. And inspired by this chap, Antonio Gramsci, if none of you read him, you should, I realized that culture could be jammed, and you could do fun stuff like this with adverts, and actually start to use advertising for something more than just selling shit to sleepwalkers. So my first round, this is especially for you, Sam, actually, the puppy on the plate. My first foray into all of this was advertising for vegetarianism and veganism, and I worked for 6 years for the Vegetarian Society of the UK. And then, whilst on a project in Ukraine trying to build sustainable cities, would you believe, I had the idea I could come back to Manchester and start an agency dedicated to all this fun, ethical, responsible communication stuff back in 2002, so 21 years old this year. So we came back to Manchester. This is the team at the moment. This is half of them canoeing last week. The other half were in the pub. You don't mix the two because drinkers are sinkers. So this was us canoeing last week. We do. I like to think we absolutely massively typify that sector that Sherelle was talking about earlier, where we do brands, campaigns, strategies for clients all over England, the UK, and in particular Europe. And this is some of our fun stuff that we do. Very visual, it's very brand-led, very campaigny for charities, NGOs, and government agencies. One little bit of our work that you'll see popping up on big buses all over the world, all over Greater Manchester, is the Bee with handlebars that our team created with Peter Saville a couple of years ago. Sherelle's touched on it, but we feel really passionate about being a key part of the creative economy. One of my other roles is I'm actually the green lead on the Greater Manchester Business Board, our old LEP, and we're really focused on the fact that the creative economy is absolutely critical. So we've got a huge amount of economic value embedded in these creative industries that Sherelle was talking about, hugely important. And one thing I find both interesting and disappointing at the same time is about 7.5% of that sector is here in the northwest of England. It's still far too dominated by London and the southeast, and that's why things like Media City are so important, to bring more of that economy up here into the northwest. And I'm pleased to say our local industrial strategy, which is being refreshed at the moment, has this sector as one of its pillars. So it's really, really, really important. So on that, a quick quiz question about how critical the creative economy is. Can anybody think of a single sector that doesn't rely on it or touch it in some way? That's the right answer. You were supposed to be silent. There will be questions where I do want you to think of more things. Now, my proposition this morning is it's a really important part of the UK economy, the Northwest economy, but ethics is a key issue running through all of this. And I would propose that Greater Manchester and the Northwest should become a centre known for being more responsible in this creative economy. This work today that I'm sharing with you is based on two things. First of all, a guide that James referred to that we're doing with our European partners on what is responsible communications and ethics in this space, but also training I've been doing with our groovy French partners, CDS. They're much cooler than we are here at my agency. We're kind of out there with Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace, and they're working with Chanel and Lacoste, and we've been a really fascinating journey with them on what is ethical advertising, what is greenwash, and what should they avoid. And so a lot of this is based on the work I've been doing with them. So this is a quick question. I'm going to ask you to put your hands up. How much will the world spend on advertising this year? 100 billion US dollars, 500 billion, or 900? Who thinks it's 100 billion US dollars? Hands up. Who thinks it's 500 billion? One lonely hand at the back. Well done, sir. 900 billion, anybody? And over? Exactly, yeah. So 900 billion is the amount that the world spends. The trend line, as you might expect, is going up. So we're about to hit $1 trillion US dollars every year spent on advertising and marketing. So here's a nice contrary quiz question. How much do you think the world spends on cancer research each year? Do we think that's 900 billion? Hands up. 200 billion, anybody? How about 5 billion? Yeah, exactly. So I would say we've got some of our priorities wrong. We're doing $1 trillion of cultural and ecological damage through irresponsible marketing and advertising each year, and it's something that needs to change. Advertising has had a dodgy history. So right from its outset, it tended to typify stereotypes, particularly of women, irresponsible consumer patterns, damaging the environment. It got even worse in the 90s and noughties, where advertising really started to break into some dodgy Russell Brand type territory. And so, you know, advertising is not known for its positivity and its responsibility. And it's still happening today. These are very recent ads. It's still happening. This is an ad that got banned very recently. That's an ad that caused loads of controversy in the States. So irresponsible advertising and marketing is right here with us now. As you'll know, this is one of my favorites from 1962, where an oil company actually boasted about melting glaciers. Can you imagine that in the midst of a climate crisis? But things are changing, and what's really interesting is that same company here in France, that same company in 2010 was advertising how much they're doing to fight the climate crisis. So that's a significant change. Might be greenwash, I'll get into that in a minute. But other brands are really building a huge profile around being known as being ethical. Clipper Tea, for example, really building huge market share by being ethical. And probably one of the most famous examples is Patagonia, where they famously did a Black Friday advert saying, "Don't buy our stuff this Black Friday." And I love this quote from them: "The greenest product is the one that already exists." So Patagonia are real pioneers in this space. There are ways to get purpose wrong, purpose-led advertising. Here's two very famous examples I thought I'd share with you this morning. This was really interesting when Coach bags put out on social this new service they're offering, so you could send in your bag and have it repaired so it would last longer. At the same time that every year they destroyed the entire inventory that wasn't sold in time for the next year's collection. A social media influencer, because they're a thing, posted about it on social. It went completely viral. They changed their policy. She got 2 million views. And they've changed. I think this is a bit of a sad example. Burger King apologized for this that they put on social because they were trying to diversify the gender of their staff. They put that out, obviously completely tone deaf. It bombed. They had to withdraw it. So you can get this stuff really badly wrong. Did anybody see this Pepsi ad? It was a really, really shit thing to do, wasn't it? So a Jenner influencer gives riot cops Pepsi and a riot stops. It's that easy. BP did a really bad one a couple of years ago where they talked about endless possibilities and featured ads with children and wind turbines when 96% of their business is still fossil fuels. They got this Client Earth ad campaign popping up in protest against it, and as you'll know, they're quite famously slammed for it. This is an awful one. Ocean plastic bottle release. There's no ocean plastic in it. It's all plastic sourced from beaches where it might have gone in the ocean. Completely ridiculous. Brewdog are really interesting. They dine out on being carbon positive and their ecological credentials. Meanwhile, they've got an absolutely toxic corporate culture that they're currently trying to fix. So you can get into really tricky territory. And a lot of people rely on sort of whether they've got a moral compass as a company, whether they do this advertising. But increasingly, it's a code, and that's what we've been working on. So all over Europe, people are starting to develop codes of conduct for advertising in this space. We have a green claims code in the UK that is not enforced in any reasonable way at all, so we need to do more on that. But we've been developing, as James said, with our partners across Europe, this code of conduct for how you do responsible communications. It will be out in October. I'm sure it will be bedtime reading for all of you. You can use the Spanish version if you prefer. But it actually gets into what is greenwash, what is stereotyped, how do you avoid painting stereotypes of people, how do you use values and ethics in a kind of meaningful way. So I'm close to wrapping up, but there are 3 ways in which I think creative communications can make a difference. So I've actually talked to you about, you know, how you can get it wrong, how you can cock up purpose, but actually I'm even more excited about the role that creative communications can play in making the world a better place. So the second half of my presentation is all about that. How am I doing for time? Am I all right? Oh, perfect, brilliant. So there are 3 main ways in which you can use creative communications and creativity to make the world a better place. One is by ensuring that those who are working for change, and I'm talking about NGOs, charities, the third sector, are actually producing ads just as effective as corporates and brands. And this is very much the core of our work at Creative Concern, is helping, in particular, NGOs and charities do a better job. You can integrate those sustainable and ethical messages into everyday marketing. Now, this is very much the sort of purpose-led space that I've just been talking about, and sometimes it can go really well. If the Wi-Fi was playing, I was going to show you an ad by the women's sanitary product line Nan, or Essity in some other markets, where they did an amazing TV ad, which was dancing vulvas, basically. It was all about the fact that, shockingly for them, 40% of women have never looked down. And actually this leads to a huge number of shaming and sort of women's health issues. Massive success, particularly in the French and German markets. So you can get purpose advertising right. And then the other thing that communications can do is really help brands and corporations on a journey towards what's called ESG, ethical, environmental and social governance, getting them actually more focused on making the world a better place. Now, that proposition, though, is, I think, quite challenging for a world which, let's face it, is in crisis. So I know there's some people in the room who are from PR agents. Who's got a PR background in the room? I saw some on the list. Yeah, hi there. There's one. Bless. Well done, you. So for you, this is all for you. The Edelman Trust Barometer is really interesting. Regularly surveys the levels of trust globally that people feel towards different types of institutions. And the last survey has showed that there are shifting patterns of trust. You won't be surprised to hear that government leaders have very low levels of trust at the moment. And what's really interesting is, I think it's quite lovely, actually. Citizens of my country and my local community, they're not bad on trust. People post-COVID are trusting scientists a lot more than they used to. So much for Michael Gove saying we've had enough of experts. But trust is in crisis. And one thing that I think is a sort of media-generated issue that was picked up in the last Edelman Trust Barometer is this, where if a person strongly disagreed with me on my point of view, I would be less likely to help them if they were in need. And I think this is getting quite profound, actually, because I believe this is a mediated cultural situation that we're in, where there's a crisis of trust that we've been generating. I'd be less likely to live in the same neighborhood if I thought people disagree with me. This is awful. And obviously that crisis of trust has been generated, and we live in a world where populists like this, thankfully, aren't in power at the moment, but are still in threat of being in power, and have massively eroded trust. So that this again was in the Edelman latest barometer, where people are saying, I don't trust the government, I have a lack of shared identity, I believe that unfairness is systemic. And all of these are issues which, for us as creative people in this room, and as people who are creators of culture, we actually have a role to play in starting to address some of this. And then there is the climate crisis. So, and obviously we sit this week where Rishi Sunak is rolling back on our commitments to fight the climate emergency. Meanwhile, we've got massive numbers of people being displaced already by climate change, which is happening all around us. And so there is a huge role for us to play as communicators, because I believe actually what's really interesting is a survey came out literally this morning saying 70% of people in the UK don't believe that we can hit our targets on climate change. And that's largely because people like Rishi Sunak are telling them that we can't do it. Good news is actually there are signs that this can actually be bridged. And I'm really proud. We did this survey with some friends of ours a couple of years ago on what are the values of people in Greater Manchester. And what was really interesting is when we talked to people in Greater Manchester, 85% of people had positive shared values. What's really interesting, though, is that after saturation of media and polarization, 75% of them believe that other people didn't share those values. So when you talk to people, they have good, strong, positive and progressive values, but they just don't believe that they're shared. And communications can do a huge amount to bridge that gap. Here's some of the ways in which we can actually use communications for good. Telling stories of positive change, reinforcing those shared values, delivering transparency, avoiding polarization. And co-design, I feel really passionately about, and that's what I'm going to wrap up on, which is the way in which we can actually create communications. We can do it in a shared way together with the audiences we're trying to reach. This is us creating a brand on a barge. There are people drinking. This isn't a drinking, sinking scenario because they're on a barge, they're not canoeing, so it's okay. So we were creating this brand for the Bridgewater Canal, so we thought we'd do it with people on the Bridgewater Canal. It worked quite well. We actually created a new brand for Cambridge Cancer Research, which was actually developed with those who've been through cancer treatment, and we told their stories in a I believe, quite a powerful way, actually, by working with them. We created this campaign for the World Green Building Council, working with architects and built environment professionals all over the world in a series of kind of crazy workshops that we did over Zoom. And then much more local to here with Home. We created the new brand for Home by working with 180 members of their audience, their artistic community, the teams that were behind it. It was all created collaboratively together. And a recent one in Wigan where we created this idea of Generation W and young people in Wigan becoming the future of the borough. So co-creation and co-design is something we're really passionate about, and I wanted to finish on saying I think this is another thing that the creative economy here in Greater Manchester should be known for. We should be known for these pioneering ways in which we create together, not by just some funky people on beanbags in a studio in the Northern Quarter. This is a studio in the Northern Quarter which does have beanbags, but this is where we co-created the Bee Network original vision with Chris Boardman, where we got people together. We drew on paper, on big maps, where we wanted the cycle lanes to be. We developed the idea of Greater Manchester's cycle networks, and off the back of that, we started playing around with bees and created a bee with handlebars, which you'll see everywhere over Greater Manchester now. So that is me done. It's lovely to talk to you all. Izzy, I hope I didn't run over, but I think I'm okay. Thank you very much, everybody. James.
Fantastic, thank you.